In the last 2 days, I've made over $9,686 trading gold. As you guys can see, this is a live account. And I'm going to show you guys exactly how I was able to catch every single trade that I've taken. And every single trade that I've taken, I have called it out completely for free inside our free Telegram. So as you guys can see, we do see that everyone is already active for today's session. This is today. We just got back home and I'm gonna pretty much trade the New York session. But let's go over every single trade. This was the last trade that we took last night that we ended up closing out over 630 pips with one position. We added up another position that did over 620 pips, which is this exact trade, a 1-3 risk to reward. Now we can go back to yesterday's trade. Yesterday we also called out some other sells. So this is going back into yesterday New York session. Which, as you guys can see, we did end up closing out the day yesterday at $6,000. So this morning I made over $3,000 already from the last previous trade, and $6,000 due to the fact that we've been taking trades from left to right, right? This was the current profits, and this is obviously us securing partials from partials, right? So beautiful day overall. This was the first trade that we have taken the beginning of this week, which we did close out over 690 pips. And we scaled in a second position yesterday that we also closed out over 320 pips. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys a quick breakdown and show you guys exactly what I was looking at from the beginning of this week, right? So we're going to start this off from a higher time frame perspective. And I actually did a live call yesterday and just me giving down the entire rundown exactly why was I looking for sales, right? So this goes all based on, let me just delete all of this. This is all from the live call. So very, very quick. Let's do this quickly from here to here. And let's just delete all of this perspective, right? Cool. So this all starts from, we can go all the way back. And this is, me doing a deep dive analysis from breaking it from a higher time frame perspective all the way to a lower time frame perspective, right? So starting off the bat, we're going to start off from the weekly time frame, right? And what I really want you guys to focus on here is two things, right? We're going to focus on this candle here, which is the entire bearish imbalance from how price went from a very strong bullish market to failing continue making new highs and then price having a decline towards the downside, right? So we all understand that price moves in two different ways, right? We have an uptrend and we also have a downtrend, right? And whenever price has an uptrend and a downtrend, it leaves an entire gap, right? And what I mean by gap, it leaves an exact zone where the previous buyers or the previous seller has stepped into the markets, right? So an imbalance candle here is exactly what I focus on, exactly how I take my personal trades. So let's say that price has a huge push towards the upside, all right? Let's say this is a huge push towards the upside. There's gonna be percentage of buyers stepping into the market. And what I like to say a lot is that market structure does play a huge part in trading, but if you really focus on the actual volume where the markets are pretty much sitting at, that's exactly where I take my personal trades, right? That's exactly where you guys can catch those limits and understand the overall directions, right? So take a look right over here. In this case here, we have a bearish imbalance, right? This is exactly where heavy sellers started stepping into the markets, which is all of this, right? We start having early sellers from here. And if you guys look towards the left side, we probably have rejected off any type of bearish imbalance, which is all of this entire candles, right? From this wicks to this wick, and price has just been respecting it. So you guys can see how price obviously shifted the trend from a bullish market to a bearish market. Now, looking at it at this exact weekly candle, right? We can see that price came back to retest these entire highs here. We have a broken structure from this case and we retested this, right? You guys can confirm this on the daily time frame. Daily time frame, what have we broke underneath? We broke underneath these exact last previous higher lows, right? So we can mark this as orange. Price had a huge drop towards the downside. Price came back to recover. So this wasn't a full switch of trend from a bearish market to a bullish market, right? We were short-term bearish, obviously creating these highs and higher low structures. And then price has finally tapped it into the bearish imbalance, right? Which is this exact level at 48.78, right? And if you guys take a look at the left side over here, we also have another bearish imbalance, which is exactly right over here, where price action obviously started having that exact momentum, right? This is exactly where price started showing weakness of bullish market. And you guys can literally tell weakness from bullish market just by looking at these candles, how there's so many wick rejection towards the upside. Price still continues with the incline towards the upside, right? If you guys go into the 4-hour time frame, you guys can see how price continues holding the bullish trend based on this exact structure, but notice these highs. The highs is what really matters in this case here. And the reason why the highs matter in this case here is simply because of how weak price failed to continue pushing, right? So if we would have probably seen a stronger candle like this, a proper pullback and a stronger push towards the upside, then we would have definitely, obviously see price continue pushing higher. So all of this entire thing that happened here was just simply price having a recovery, right? Just to simply recover, which is a simple pullback. So after having that exact recovery, this is exactly where price confirmed the last lower high, which is sitting at the 48.71. So you guys can go here on the daily time frame. You guys can see how we had highs here, lows here, highs here, lower lows here, and 8 lower highs here, respecting this exact structure. Now we go down into the 4-hour time frame. On the 4-hour time frame, once we respected this, notice how price had another shift. We finally broke on the new structure. And what do we identify right over here? We identified a new bearish imbalance. This is exactly where heavy sellers stepped into the market. And after with this exact heavy seller, we also confirm a break of structure, which was how price was forming the last higher low, which in this case is right over here, right? So we respected that entire structure from the higher time frame, right? So this is the first one. We finally saw sellers stepping into the market, which is right over here. And then market started having a decline. Now, another thing I forgot to mention, imbalance, once again, are zones where price gives you the reason to always pull back, because this is exactly what you want to be trading for. The imbalances, right? The imbalances is leaving a huge gap where market is always going to come back to fill up that entire gap so it can continue the directions, right? So in this case here, we had a bearish gap here. Market started declining towards the downside. So obviously we were in a bearish market, right? And you guys can obviously see more bearish imbalance from this case here, right? So here we do have another break of structure, which is right over here. And you guys can see that we also form another bearish imbalance, which is right over here. And you guys can see how price rejected it 2 times. We rejected it 1 time here, where it sold off. And we also rejected it another time right over here, where it also sold off. So it sold off 2 times already. So from this point here to this point here, from this point here to all the way point here. And then if you guys take a look here at the right side, then we obviously have the opposite side from this entire bullish imbalances towards the upside. So there's multiple things going on in here. So it's basically, price bouncing off from these exact levels and not really from the levels that you guys originally think it is, right? So you guys really just want to focus on where there's a lot of volumes in the market. So where a lot of heavy buyers or heavy sellers stepped into the market. So in this case here, we respected it and then price started having another push towards the upside. We broke above these highs here, right? Which obviously confirms that there's a potential shift of structure. But what happens next? Going back into the 4-hour time frame, notice how price came back to retest the original move, the original imbalance from this case here. And you guys can take a look at the right side here, how price started showing weakness towards the upside. So this was last week, right? This was from 511 and right now we're at 527. This is the exact trade that, or overall, I was actually selling the market from this point here as well. But these are the exact, confirmation that gave us more confirmation to continue selling for this exact week. So once we came into this 4-hour, we came back to retest this exact imbalance. And you guys can see the weakness of how candles, right? Notice all of this candle here in the 4-hour time from how there's just strong candle closures. And notice as soon as price taps into the imbalance here, in this case here, we are showing weakness, showing us that buyers are no longer interested, right? There's no more momentum for buyers, which means that buyers are exhausted, right? And you guys can see how the higher lows were here. So I can guarantee you guys, if you go here on the daily time frame, it's just price, giving us very undecisive candles. You guys can see weak rejection towards the upside, weak rejection towards the downside. So market just playing from ranges to ranges, from highs to lows. So the best bet that we have here is to see exactly where price can potentially head. Because again, deep diving into the market, you guys go into the hourly time frame, we are having reaction. We can go 2 hours as well. We are having reaction from how price broke above these highs here, and we obviously left bullish imbalance towards this case here. So we left some bullish imbalance from here, and we also left some other bullish imbalance from right over here. And you guys can confirm this on the 4-hour time frame, how price just, bouncing from these exact levels. And on top of that, we left other imbalances, which we had the original imbalance, which is right here. And then we also had minor imbalances, which is right above here. So we were having reaction from this exact imbalance, and price was holding for a while, but notice how we continue failing to break above those highs because price is respecting the original trend. So what does this create right over here? You guys go on the daily time frame. This creates the next lower high. Right, so you guys can literally see the trend from highs to lows to lower highs to lows to lower highs. Right, so that right there was another confirmation for us, and we just waited for the market to obviously have the push or the break of structure in this case here, so that it can actually confirm exactly where price is going. Now, what really sold me off in this trade here was just due to the fact that if you guys take a look right in the left side, we have again the bullish imbalance from the original move from this case. And notice how this was last week, right? This is coming into 5:15, or this was probably 2 weeks ago. How this bearish candle here just disrespected. And you guys can say disrespected because we closed underneath it. If price would have wicked it and closed right above, then buyers would have actually taken control. But in this case here, price just disrespected this level and broke underneath. So once we broke underneath, that's exactly where we started seeing bearish volume once again. Right now, we can deep dive into hourly time frames. You guys can see how this has now turned into our areas of interest, because this is exactly where heavy sellers stepped into the market. And you guys have all of this as well, but you guys can notice the candle, they're just very weak candles, so you can't really confirm them. 4 hour, this looks perfect. Hourly time frame, this as well looks perfect, and we're underneath the left side one, which is the reason why this continues being respected. Now, in this case here, market started selling off, and remember, you never want to chase the market, or you never want to chase exactly where price is at. So if price sold off, you do not want to be taking sales from here, or you do not want to be taking for sales from here, because notice all the candles is very important to understand, because it shows you the momentum, the volume of the actual on direction. So in this case here, you guys can see how the candles are just weak. They're not giving you very good closures, and they're not giving you exactly the volume that we want. So in this case here, our goal is just to wait for price to pull back towards these levels. And you guys can see how price pulled back once over here, sold off, once over here, and sold off. Right now, we're gonna go over the trade that we took this morning, or the beginning of the week. The beginning of the week, we already marked up our level, and all we simply waited for was for price to reject from this exact level, which is giving us the supply zone. Now, we already identified the higher time frame trend, and we already identified the imbalance that we're going to be focusing on. Right now, the same exact pattern that we do from a higher time frame, we're going to start doing it to a lower time frame. So we're going to go down into the 30-minute time frame and to the 15-minute time frame. Those are the two markets, or the two time frame that I like to trade the most from. So we're taking a look here from the 15-minute time frame, and once we respected this exact levels from the first time here, you guys take a look here on the 30-minute time frame, we left a bearish fair value gap from this point from here. Right, so you guys can see how price took above these highs here, which was simply a liquidity sweep. Right, you guys can see this from this high here to this high here. Price liquidity sweep from there. We retested the gap from the higher time frame. Price sold off. We left a fair value gap from this point here. So again, market is always going to come back towards these levels. Notice how price came into this one right here. Right, so if we go into the 15, we probably had one somewhere around here. We can say a good one could probably be this exact structure from here, which is, we can say this entire blocks from here, which is exactly where price created that last high. We didn't fully tap into the original one, but we rejected from this exact zone, and price started selling off. Here, we broke above those highs, and once again, those are called liquidity sweeps. And we tapped into the original one, and notice from this exact bullish push towards the upside, notice the candle weakness. Price is showing weak towards the upside. Price is coming back, respecting the gap, having another push, and rejecting. Having another push over here, and rejecting. So 3 times rejection of the original gap, which is this one right here on the 30-minute time frame, and continue respecting, the higher time frame imbalance, which is right over here. So confirm on the hourly time frame, weak candles. Notice all the wick rejection. So clearly it's showing us that buyers are no longer in control. That means that they're exhausted. So what are we going to wait for in this case here? We're going to wait for the same exact pattern. So if we take a look here on the 15-minute time frame, this is exactly how I caught my entry here. 15-minute time frame, as soon as we saw price rejecting these highs once again and we closed a bearish engulfing candle right over here, all I was waiting for was for price to break underneath the structure. And if you guys go here on the 5-minute time frame, you guys can see on the 5-minute time frame we did have this bullish imbalance, which is right over here. So all I waited for was for price to disrespect it, which is close underneath. Once we close underneath, that's exactly where I took my trade. So we disrespected this exact candle right here, which is this one right here. Price closed underneath and disrespected. That's exactly where we took my entry. So that was the first trade of the week. The second trade that we ended up taking was just price scaling in. It was just simply scaling another entry. And by scaling another entry, this time I focused on the key levels, which is from the intraday time frame. Due to the fact that, again, if price breaks above a previous highs, price always has the power to come back to retest. And this is exactly the level where you guys can potentially look for the continuation, right? But notice how here we started showing we did reject a couple times, right? As you guys can see. Price did reject, and price probably did over 160 pips. But notice how the volume for bearish was still holding, right? And from this case here, you guys can confirm this maybe from the 15-minute time frame. If you guys take a look here on the left side, we had this bearish imbalance right here. And on top of that, from this high here, we also had another momentum from here. All right, so notice how price was respecting, bouncing from here, bouncing from there, and finally sold off. Once we finally sold off, that's exactly where I identified my next imbalance. In this case here, we identify it from this candle, which is exactly where volume stepped into the market. And this was all during the pre-New York session. So remember, we don't chase price underneath, because notice how price took underneath this lows here, respected some of this exact demand where buyers stepped into the market. So the probability of price playing out this bullish trend obviously is a 50-50. So we wait for price to come here. Notice how it showed weakness from this case here. We waited for price to sell off. Once we sell off, that's all break a structure from 5-minute structure from the 5-minute time frame. So we sell off from this case, and what do we build here? We build up another imbalance, which is the exact entry zone that I took it. So again, repeating the history or repeating the style from higher time frame to lower time frame perspective. So that was the trade that we took. We ended up closing out this position very nice. Coming into the Asian session, once again, price came back towards the same exact key level. And notice how after this huge move towards the upside, boom, buyers were exhausted once again. Never showed another highs. It just respected this and started declining towards the downside. If price would have inverse or pretty much break and disrespect this one here and broke above it, then yes, we would have been bullish market. But as soon as price showed the weakness from here, price started having the decline. And that's exactly where we took our third entry, which was the one that we took last night, that we woke up from this morning hitting our final take profits. So a nice push towards the upside, but no continuation. Why is that continuation? There was no continuation. Once again, price is respecting this exact zone right here. And if you guys go on the 30-minute, we're respecting this one. We go into the hourly time frame, intraday time frame. We're still trading underneath this intraday key level, which is at 45.35. And you guys can also see from the hourly time frame how this was just simply a wick. So 2 wicks already rejecting that exact, order block. And from there on, price just did the exact move. So beautiful trade that we end up taking this, past couple of days. We did exactly what we wanted, which was just simply following the trend from, higher time frame perspective, breaking it down to lower time frame perspective, and just focusing on the candles where there's a lot of volumes, which obviously aligns with the trend. So that's all we did for this week, guys. We did catch amazing amount of moves, amazing amount of pips already the last 2 days, starting from Monday afternoon, which is obviously Monday we had a bit more, so the market was kind of slow. So we were counted for Tuesday to Wednesday. So 2 days in these nice trades. Now in today's market session, I'm gonna continue looking for more sells. I'm actually looking for more sells at this exact low zone here, which is around the 44.75 areas. So we'll see what happens for today. So I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys on the next one.